an original MCM production.
Thank you, President Dan. I'm very privileged to introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Julie Tolan. She's President and CEO of the YMCA of Metropolitan Milwaukee. The Y is a nonprofit association with a mission to strengthen the foundations of the community by nurturing the potential of kids, promoting healthy living, and fostering a sense of social responsibility. Kind of what Keith was talking about a little bit earlier during the invocation. Since literally her first day on the job, Julie's been leading the Milwaukee Y through what could easily be said as the most challenging period in its 150-year history. In Julie's nearly 30 years of experience in the nonprofit sector in Milwaukee, she's learned that, well, some things are really worth fighting for. Never was that more evident than when she joined the Y in August of 2013. She led the organization through a comprehensive restructuring and an 8-month bankruptcy process. Exiting Chapter 11 this past January, laser-focused, stronger, and more sustainable than ever. She previously served as president of the United Performing Arts. We all kind of know that as UPAF. Vice president of University of Advancement at Marquette University, where she oversaw several multi-million-dollar fundraising campaigns. Most recently, Julie was president of J.A. Tolan and Associates, where she consulted with executives on nonprofit leadership and organizational efficiency and board development. Julie is also an active member of our community, having served on numerous boards and committees. Currently, she's the president of the University Club of Milwaukee, just across the street, and serves on the Milwaukee Archdiocese Catholic Schools Commission. She's a member of the Greater Milwaukee Committee, Temple, and Professional Dimensions. Julie is a graduate of the University of Michigan and the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University. Please join me in welcoming this courageous and effective leader, Julie Tolan.
Thank you, Jill. It was a beautiful introduction. And Keith, I would like to personally thank you for your prayers and your good wishes. We are accepting all of those these days at the Milwaukee Y. I'm really grateful to be with you today. Some good friends, former colleagues are here. I'm going to give a sense about the journey we've been on. It occurred to me not long ago, a lot about our story's been written, and I've had the chance to speak to different groups about where we are and where we've been and where we're headed. But it is an opportunity like this that gives me a chance to frame a little bit more of the context. So let's start with a show of hands. To Keith's point, who here learned to swim at the Y? Their children learned to swim at the Y. You went to camp at the Y. You did anything with the Y, whether in Milwaukee or elsewhere. Right. So that's a big part of why I'm here today, because when you talk about what makes this worth fighting for, it's the impact it's the fact that we've touched so many lives. In Milwaukee, we've been here for 156 years. So you are really hard-pressed, if you think about it, and we all have our favorite organizations, to think of a nonprofit that has been around for 156 years. The United Way came 50 years later. The Boys and Girls Club came 75 years later. This is a place that has adapted, changed, and figured it out, all for the greater good of our human family over a long period of time. And so when I came to the conversation about why this was important, while much of what has happened wasn't clear to me then, it was clear to me that this was an organization that really Milwaukee needed, and whether we had to reimagine dramatically as we've done or just to continue to be relevant, it was important. So people ask, how did it happen? How do you have an organization for 156 years? You go through bankruptcy, which of course is no one's aspiration. How did it happen? And I would like to start with the context of people, there's a human need to give accountability. Sometimes we call it blame. Sometimes it's justice. Whatever we frame it as, the bottom line is, in our story, there is no one moment, no one person, certainly not one board, not one decision that created our challenge. It really was a collective series of things over time, and because we all love this image, it was our perfect storm. So there's three things that really contributed, I think, simplistically, if we boil it down. There were several external factors, and they influenced strategic decisions, which were in fact influenced by an internal culture that was so passionate about mission. So clearly, when we think about external circumstances, think about 2000, the year 2000, which is when the buildup of debt really began in earnest for the Milwaukee Y. That was a really prosperous time. The Y was part of the prosperity. We had plenty of margin, and we made the decision to fund growth with debt as opposed to fundraising. Some fundraising was done, but typically we look back. That's a decision people question, but I would tell you, if we go back in context and put yourself back in that era, that was the basis for that decision. Other external factors were, there was really no competition at that time for any of the things that we do. People think about fitness. Today, Milwaukee is the second most crowded space for fitness in the country. Sometimes it doesn't look like it when we look around, but it is a true data point. Secondly, I mean, people forget that fitness isn't all we do by far. So when you think about the various things we've been in, whether it was running a K-8 charter school, whether it was childcare of all kinds, the Y, people don't know necessarily, created childcare in a contemporary sense. So before this era of 2000-ish, not a lot of competition in anything we did. We had the market, and so that influenced the decision. Another thing, when I think about internal culture, it's important to remember that nonprofits are organizations of people who are passionate about mission. So whatever that mission is, typically the people who work for it are of it. They are deeply passionate. It becomes part of who they are. It's why they exist. And at the Y, I will tell you, I've had a lot of experience. My whole career's been in the nonprofit sector. You are hard-pressed to find a more passionate group about what they do. They typically spend their lives in these centers and places of work. They'll travel around the country and move and relocate their lives to continue to be part of the movement. So if that's true, and you've got to change, you've got to stop doing something, that's pretty hard. And it's not something that comes easily. And so one of the strategic decisions we made, as I think a result of that beautiful culture, it's the underbelly of the beautiful passion that propels us. Instead of eliminating things, because it's too hard to imagine separating ourselves from them, we cut at the margin to balance a budget. And we do that enough over time, and what happened in our case was we weakened the organization instead of ultimately fixing it. I want to, I like this slide, I think it's very funny, but I also think it's important before we get into the conversation to give you that context, because I really feel strongly one of the learnings from all of this is there's so many things that we can't control or see next, but there are things that we can work toward every day in each of our organizations to try to ensure things like this don't happen in the future. So with 2013, I started in August of 2013, and one of the easiest things to see before we really understood much more was we were doing lots of great things. Again, all incredibly well-intentioned, and in many cases, really fantastic outcomes. But as a result, our brand had become diluted. In many cases, people didn't even know we were the sponsor of some of the most successful programs we ran. So figuring out how to focus and narrow the number of things we were committed to was clearly an objective. I was in the role for a month when everything kind of shifted, and shifted pretty quickly. It was right around Labor Day, and 10 people in significant jobs, management jobs, quit. It was the Thursday, Friday before Labor Day. And I didn't understand, like, that's a lot of people in an organization of our size. And so I asked the head of HR at the time for some data on what was our trend in terms of transitions out of the organization. And this was where, see, none of this shows up on your financials. None of this shows up on people ask me, didn't you know? Well, I knew the headlines. I knew we had too much debt probably. And I knew there'd been recent, in the last couple of years, some downturn in revenues. But I attributed a lot of that to the brand question, and that if we could focus the brand and demonstrate greater impact, it would work. What you can't see on any balance sheet or income statement is the statistic of 285 of the 350 full-time people had voluntarily left the organization in the preceding 12 to 18 months. So that's an 84% turnover rate, which doesn't generally work well if you're trying to actually continue to stay in business. So at that point, I went to the CFO at the time and said, you know, what is going on? And that's when she said to me, I think we're imploding. And I wasn't sure if she was kidding, because we actually had a very good relationship. And she explained to me then the cutting at the margin as opposed to stopping doing anything. And then you have all this talent that goes, and there we were. So what happened next was really the fun part. We say fun now, but we look back, and there really were, we had to bring in the A-team. We had to assemble amongst ourselves as a board. There were many heroes in this story, and I can't say that enough. And I'd start with our board. Our board chair, Richard Cantor's here today. And a group of 7 was assembled and appointed by the larger board to really have the authority to make decisions about everything that needed to be done, to actually, in the unknown, come up with a plan that would work. At this point, we had really little sense of what that would be. We had many iterations. Over 7 to 8 months, everything was on the table. Many things that are very different than what we've become. And bankruptcy was not a decision until 7 months in. People question that. It's true. It wasn't anyone's desire to become adversarial with people we called friends, with great institutions that had been partners of the Y for decades, maybe a century. So to know how serious that decision was is important. Anyway, the group of 7 met weekly, every Monday night for 3 to 4 hours from October to June. Now, all of us are volunteers, and I would suggest to you that is what we call yeoman service. That's to say nothing of the many other meetings in between and the conversations and negotiations that we had to go through. So truly the leadership of our board is to be applauded and commended. When we went through the plans, there were several times we tried to do a Project Reimagine, or Project Reinvest, where we'd stop doing a couple things, we'd sell this parcel of land, and then I hoped to find strategic philanthropy that could bridge us for a couple of years. Let's say 10 people who were loved the Y, who had been very close to the Y for many years and were people of significant means, who could help us with, call it $6 million in the aggregate, and bridge our turnaround. And I met with them, several of them, and when at the fifth person, this was not where their passion was any longer. It had been an organization they'd loved but couldn't see. I knew that wasn't going to work, and that we had to start to look at much more substantial restructuring. People asked all along, why don't you fundraise yourself out of this problem? $30 million, get the debt paid off with a debt elimination campaign. So how many here would give to that campaign? Right. So what I knew was we couldn't do a campaign to save the Y and then on the other end really continue to have people's investment and partnership going forward, because we would, tap out. And plus, I didn't think 30 million was at all feasible in light of everything else. So it was until 2 weeks before we filed that we had a very different plan. We were going to close most of our urban settings. We were going to keep our profitable suburban centers and our programming, and it would be the elimination of really everything we hold dear today in terms of our urban mission. And then another hero stepped up, the Ramirez family. They saw the vision. We had talked a lot about how could we maintain this urban footprint. They, in their relationship with the Waukesha YMCA, made a magnificent gift of $2 million to help them acquire 3 of our Western YMCAs, which then was the catalyst to encourage, inspire, hopefully, the West Bend or Kettle Moraine YMCA to acquire our Fife family in Saukville. So one of the great outcomes and successes of our story is the extent to which our mission continued and actually strengthened through a restructuring process, because we were able to sell program to other YMCAs that had greater resource than we did. If we'd kept the suburban model and eliminated our urban model, we still had huge risk, because the suburban model, our centers needed a tremendous amount of reinvestment. We had what we estimated at about $8 million of CapEx that was imminent. It wasn't a 10-year horizon. So we were going to have risks no matter which model we went with, and we decided that with the Ramirez's generosity, with this notion of a much smaller footprint, we would take the bet on philanthropy focused on impact-based programs. So that's the context for how we got where we are today. Other heroes, I just have to say, there's no question we would consider the banks heroes in our story. They gave us an incredible gift in terms of their willingness to forgive some of our debt. And they were our partners through and through, as challenging as that was. And our advisors, talk about an A-team. Some of you are here today. Thank you for being here. I would pick this team again and again and again, and I hope I get to outside of the bankruptcy sometime. But we were blessed with extraordinary legal counsel, extraordinary communication counsel, extraordinary financial advisors, and really, if you talk about the difference between an A team and a B team, when you're in a crisis, you want the A team. And if you need any references, I'm here to help. And finally, I would just say our employees were heroes. Our employees who had been through so very much over such a long period of time, they stayed with us. And while they could have left like a lot of other people, like the other 285, and they didn't. And so I will always give them the attribution and gratitude. So the new Milwaukee Y, we are much smaller. We were 10 centers, 2 overnight camps, a myriad of programs out in the community. Today we are 4 centers, our downtown, Right Height, Park Lawn, we're the only YMCA in a housing project in the United States, and Northside. We have a myriad of other programs, we'll show you the map, but we're picking 4 that we think align with some of the most critical issues of our community and needs, and things that we are very, very good at. So early childhood education, we run 3 sites of 5-star early childhood education. It's very expensive, but we have found the support of the philanthropic community to bridge the gap between what Wisconsin Shares covers and what our families can afford. And we know that this is a critical input into the ability to develop a workforce and a citizenship that can succeed. And this is the place we can play in education. We also have Camp Fly, which is fun learning for youth, a summer learning loss remediation day camp. So in all of our urban centers, we run this programmatic, very strong curricular program that's both fun for kids, they have safety, and they learn. They don't fall back. And these are the kids, again, who are most at risk. Milwaukee Swims. We went in partnership with Milwaukee County into the parks this summer, both for Camp Fly, where we expanded into 5 county parks to bring the program, and for Milwaukee Swims, where we went into pools that in some cases were actually virtually in lockdown because they were hazards to their neighborhoods, and we brought back swimming. Drowning is still a leading cause of death in our inner city, and it's unimaginable for those who know how to swim. But in Milwaukee Swims, we charge $5 per participant for a 10-week program. And this year, in this summer alone, over 1,000 people learned to swim. Philanthropy bridged the rest. And finally, Healthy Communities. That's a program in architecture mode right now where we're going out, taking a lot of the programs we run in our centers and bringing them into neighborhoods that need us most. So this is the visual. We are as much about outbound program as we are about what happens in our centers. We have a new business model. So previously, membership was 50% of our overall revenue. Today it's 29%. Fitness will no longer be our front door, but it'll be a critical way of how we support families in their quest to lead healthy lives. And as you can see, programs, strategic programs like childcare, camp, early childhood education is where we want to build our future. And finally, philanthropy going forward, 21% of our business model, or $3.8 million. And here's what it looks like. It's hard to see, but it's to show you that the things that we're in are still having tremendous impact all over the southeastern Wisconsin or the 5-county area. We still run some early childhood and before and after school in the collar counties outside of Milwaukee, but we have all of our other programs concentrated in the city. And again, when we made the decision for this footprint, we sat down with other nonprofits and asked, what is it that you do well? I sat down with the Boys and Girls Clubs and literally did a matrix. What do they do? What do we do? What should we stop doing? In some cases, we transferred really important programs to who we were to other organizations, like the Boys and Girls Clubs, because they could bring scale to them, like our school, Young Leaders Academy, which we sold to Milwaukee College Prep because they had scale. They could create impact in a way we weren't going to be able to going forward. There was a great line that someone said to me early on, which is, read the book, Sacred Cows Make the Best Hamburgers. And I would encourage any of you who have to change to do the same. It's actually a great book, and it does get to this issue of the thing you think is most important to who we are, maybe the very thing you have to let go of to let it live. So we learned a lot. We're still learning every day for certain, but I would consider these issues. We had the courage to question. We were not afraid to ask, should we simply go away? What if the Milwaukee Y went away? If it's meant to be, it can be reborn. But then we really did the work around understanding where the gaps would be and getting past the emotional gut reaction, which is you can't just say you can't go away because you don't want to and it's painful. You have to have a reason for being. So that was a huge gift to have the courage to question. The willingness to change. You've got to be able to change and give up other things. And I would say our consistent, transparent communication with our family internally, all of our stakeholders, and with the greater public was essential to the process. So today, since January, I like to say, and actually a board member of ours really got a beautiful perspective on this. While we are committed to demonstrating what's different about us since this process, so since January, here's the difference. We've been in business for over 155 years making a difference, and so we want to celebrate that. But we also want to make sure you understand that it is a new day for the Milwaukee Y, that we are stronger than we've ever been, and that we're committed to having very focused impact where we think we can really deliver quality and excellence. So here's some data points of our results in just a few short months. And we're really proud of this because in some cases I would point to Milwaukee Swims and actually Camp Fly in the parks. If that was not, that was important to do because we wanted to show we were different and we were committed to impact. It was very hard to do as fragile as we were coming out of bankruptcy. And it was very hard to do because we really, when we exited bankruptcy, yes, we eliminated all of our debt, but we had nothing. It was a complete startup. It was like a hard lift to actually launch a new program and manage cash that is a really difficult thing. So, and getting our message out all at the same time. But it was the right thing to do because our community has been better for it, for certain. I'm happy to tell you that our earned revenue, so that's about 80% of what we count on in our business model, is on track. It's getting traction and it's taking hold. Where we're confused, and I mean this quite sincerely, it's too soon to have a diagnosis, but philanthropy is well behind where we would have imagined. 3.8 million was an increase over what we'd seen in the last few years because, of course, the organization was in distress. It's not, it's only 20% of our overall budget, which is a healthy number in a nonprofit. It's not too much. So we're pushing hard to the end of this year. This will determine a lot of what we do, how we reframe for next year, because this is a work in progress. It may mean that we have to make some additional changes, that we will continue to evolve to right size to the place that's sustainable. But I'm still not convinced that the community has, and this is why we're grateful for your advocacy and telling the story in your spheres of influence, that people understand. A lot of people thought bankruptcy was all we needed to do and everything would be okay. Some people have said to us, well, we're just waiting to see if you make it, which of course is a negative self-fulfilling prophecy if they continue to wait and see. And then there's the question of, and I honestly don't know, my gut isn't clear on what I think. Does the community say, this is really great, great job, why? But it's just not a priority. And those are the things we're going to have to find out. We're going to work with every minute we've got between now and the end of the year to try to earn people's support. But at the end of the day, we are a work in progress. This will be a Milwaukee Y that delivers. It just may be less than what we hoped. So let me tell you a few stories. You've heard from me why I think this has been worth fighting for and why I think, in fact, this is really an extraordinary success story in the making. But it's more important probably to hear from the people that we benefit. And this is this beautiful quote from a mother whose child, her first and only child, is in Y, early childhood education. And they helped me raise her. Her vocabulary's gotten better. She may even be more advanced because of the extra attention she's getting. So we're grateful to Pianka for her support. This is Tasha. When we asked her after Milwaukee Swims what she liked best about the summer Swims program, she said, well, I'm not afraid anymore. And this is Julius Perez. You might have read about him in the Journal Sentinel. When he came to the Y 18 months ago, he could barely walk. In fact, he was in a scooter. He was severely overweight. He had pre-diabetes. He was blind. He went to a myriad of other fitness clubs to ask. He was determined to change his life and make a better life for himself, and everybody turned him down, but not the Milwaukee Y, because this is what we're about. We welcomed him with open arms. One of our fantastic personal trainers, Molly, has worked with him, and today, 18 months later, Julius has lost 175 pounds. He's no longer at risk for diabetes. He is walking, and he's healthy enough to maintain a full-time job. So from our perspective, these are important outcomes. They make a difference. We really have worked hard to reimagine the Milwaukee Y in a way that responds to the most critical needs of our community and aligns with what we can do best. We will resist the very alluring temptation to just do what people want us to do because it is a need. We've picked the needs where we can deliver quality and excellence and where we believe the community will be there to support us. So we really are passionate about the vision of a healthier, stronger, and safer Milwaukee. We can only do that in partnership with others. And so our story is yet unfinished. It will continue to unfold. And we are just grateful for your being here today to hear a little bit more about it. And I'm certainly happy to answer any of your questions. Yes. So this is to the issue of the external circumstance and the competition that exists now. I think one of the challenges, what we're trying to do around membership now is position our value proposition not so much about come to the Y and work out like you can anywhere else, but around being associated with a larger mission of good for the community. We still have to be competitive in what we offer, and we're working very hard to do that. That's actually a very expensive thing to do. And it's one of the things that got us to this challenged place was we put off deferred maintenance, we put off investment in facilities because we had to manage our debt. So we're still working through the reinvestment we need to make. But fitness, at the end of the day, how we talk about supporting families and how they reach it, very few, in fact, I would argue, no one else is as committed to the continuum of the human family, from a child to a senior like the Y. So if we could do a better job of telling that story, I think we will always have some success, but we haven't done that as consistently as we need to. It's a great question. What role does the national organization play in the local organization? So the Y is part of a international federation, which means they actually have no authoritative role over us. They can't come in and tell us what to do, with the exception of how we use the brand. So the image of the Y, and if we were to do anything that would, and frankly, this was a very scary thing for them, of course. It was undesirable for us. Well, it was really undesirable to have one of the most long-standing YMCA's go bankrupt. It was a very painful thing for the national Y. But they have no authoritative role. They are partners. They help us with resources when we need it. And we are happy to pay our dues to do that. Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So the Young Men's Christian Association, as the first woman CEO, I can tell you, it doesn't stop me at all. I think this is a very important conversation. It's not one we've spent a lot of time on in this process, but I think when you start to be serious about how you distinguish yourself, we have to get back to our core values. The YMCA was deliberately young male at the same time that there was a YWCA that did the same things. Today, the organizations have very different missions, and we have been welcoming young women and women of all ages for 100 years. So, but from a branding perspective, I don't think so. I think being clear to what our mission is the most important thing. Yeah, do we have any involved? No, the YMCAs that we sold to other YMCAs, Tri-County, which is in Menominee Falls, is now part of the Waukesha Association. The West Suburban, which was part of our association, is now part of Waukesha, and Southwest. And then Fife Family in Saukville is now part of Kettle Moraine or West Bend. We have members who utilize those facilities. One of the beautiful things about a Y is if you belong to one Y, you can go to any Y. So certainly some of our members utilize the Tri-County, but organizationally or from a governance perspective, no. Yes, sure. So depending on the program, we have looked at that extensively, but building those takes resource. It takes time and focus, and we have sense about some of the things we would want to do in that regard, but truly surviving takes a lot of focus. And so as we have to do right by what we're doing today, because we think these things are really important. how we grow, we'll make decisions very carefully and strategically, including opportunities like that. Yes, hi. Thanks for letting me know. We'll get back to you, Roger. I think it's an electronic issue, and these are very difficult transitions to make to communicate effectively so that people, we don't want to go to collection agencies. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I would say I'm certain, because I know of the systems changes we're putting in place, this is a function of our trying to become, it's also less it's much more cost effective for us too. So the question is, as we come to an end, where are we financially, and do we think this model will work? So we're behind. You saw philanthropy is considerably behind, like $2 million behind target. We can, the way that philanthropy works for our organization, but really for a lot of nonprofits, is the vast majority, and in our case I mean 80 to 90% of our philanthropy in cash comes in November and December. So we will not know where we land until December 31st. And that's a terribly unnerving thing. I can't actually state that strongly enough, just how unnerving this is. But it is true that we will then see where we land, and we will make decisions about changing the business model if necessary in the year ahead. Is he a plant? Like, is that, Mary, I swear to you I didn't do this. Because the rules are very clear for Rotary speakers. You're not supposed to ask for money, and I'm not asking for money. But if you were interested in supporting us, you could go to our website, YMCAMKE.org, or Make It Count, Milwaukee. I'll give you my business card before we leave. Thank you all. I really appreciate your time.
I'm one of the guys that learned how to swim at the local Y, so I certainly appreciate, the story of what happened at the Y and then its rebirth. I think that was great. Really appreciate it. Julie, Rotary is an international leader in the effort to eradicate polio. In the last 30 years, we've immunized over 2.5 billion children, and as a result, the disease has almost been eliminated. So we'll be making a donation in your name to continue that effort, and so that we'll buy 50 doses of the vaccine and donate it to the Rotary Foundation to bring us closer to the goal of a polio-free world. Now, a few last-minute items. Following our adjournment, Environment and Ecology meets in room 413, History and Current Events meets in room 411, and the Maritime Committee meets in the office. Start running out of space. Next week, November 24th, Milwaukee historian and writer John Gerda will present on his new book, Milwaukee, a City of Neighborhoods, that was recently published by Historic Milwaukee. I have to welcome our new members, Pat and Roy. Thank you, Rand, for bringing them in. On your way out, sign up for the networking hour December 3rd and ring bells on December 5th. And if you didn't see them on your way in, take a look at the beautiful photos of the Arboretum this fall. They're taken by Matt Flower, which are running on the digital recognition board next to the registration table. That's it. We're adjourned.
An MCM production.